that was supposed to sound like an elk. Because it's September, and it is Elk Week on Ron Spomer Outdoors, coming up pretty soon on our sister channel, Ron Spomer Outdoors. All about elk hunting, elk cartridges, elk rifles, and scopes and binoculars, and we just recorded a bunch of stuff at our elk boot camp, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So today we're going to try to answer a lot of questions from folks about elk and get some of their ideas about the greatest elk rifles they've ever had. And I'm also going to talk about an old book of mine called The Rut, in which you can figure out things like, why does an elk bugle when he has a harem of cows, which pulls all the other bulls in to compete for those cows? That sounds like a pretty stupid bull elk, and yet they all do it. It's explained in the elk chapter in this book, The Rut, that I wrote many, many years ago. I think it's out of print, so we might redo this thing someday, but what it is about is what the animals do during the rut and why do they do it. And the answer for this one, real quickly, for the elk is, they have found out that if a bull elk with a harem of cows doesn't bugle a lot, the cows lose interest in him and they drift away, and then another bull can have them. So the big bull has got to bugle a lot, make a lot of noise, and then his challengers come in and he can prove himself as deserving by fighting them all off. That is how the cows select a superior bull. Pretty cool stuff. We talked about that and all things elk at our elk camp, so you might want to check that out on Ron Spomer Outdoors YouTube channel. But for now, let's just see what some of our viewers have asked about elk recently and in the distant past, based on some of the old elk cartridge reviews that we've done. First of all, there's someone called Ebby, who says, "Hey Ron, I was wanting to ask if you could do a series as an introduction to hunting because I really want to hunt, but I'm not sure how to go about it." Well, Ebby, this is what we covered, obviously, in elk boot camp. So that is one option. You're not going to find a boot camp everywhere in the country, but I think there are more and more places starting to offer some basic hunting instruction like that. You can always look for hunting clubs in your area. There used to be, I think, a lot more than there are these days. The social media has taken a lot of that away, but it used to be culturally that we would have various hunting camps and clubs in small town America, and you could go there and learn your ropes, but you might find some folks at a local shooting range who hunt and might take you under their wing. And don't be ashamed. Don't be too proud to ask somebody for help. That's a big mistake that I made when I was younger, because what I have found is that any young person comes up to me and asks for some advice on that, I'm more than happy to give it. It makes me feel good that others are interested in what I'm interested in. So I think you'll have some pretty good luck that way. But you might want to check out things like our elk boot camp and see if there are other things like that out there.
Please tell them Tate Bradfield from Process Elk.
And Betsy says to say, be sure to tell you that you can go to processedhunter.com. That is Tate Bradfield. He is a hunting guide specializing in elk, and this is where the hunting school came from. He pretty much put it all together. I just helped him out a little bit. So you go there and you can get all the information on the next camp coming up. Now,
we might also do one for
yes, dear.
deer or whitetail.
We also have in the works a school for whitetail and mule deer hunting, perhaps. So if any of you are interested in this kind of a thing, let us know, because we've been scratching our heads for several years about whether or not people would be interested in an instructional camp like that. And I know the guys at this elk camp really were. It would kind of surprised me. There were some 22 different guys there, ages from 17 all the way to 75. And we all had a great time. And every one of them I interviewed afterwards said that they got a lot out of the camp. They really enjoyed it. They felt they had gotten their money's worth, and they wanted to come back. So if you are interested in some sort of a hunting camp, and we're thinking, like Betsy said, mule deer and whitetail, or maybe one or the other, something like that. Or maybe a general North American big game hunting camp. I think that would be fun too. Let us know if there's enough interest. Maybe we will put one together. Now, I wanted to jump to this one from MT military man who had some interesting historical perspective on elk cartridges. We're going to hear from a lot of folks who've got ideas on the best elk cartridge here pretty quick. But this guy says Les Bowman was consulted by Remington as a cartridge designer and a close friend, Mike Walker. Mike Walker worked for Remington, and he designed the 7mm 08 cartridge, and I think he had a pretty big hand in developing that Model 70 short action rifle that shot it in 1980 that came out. At any rate, Les Bowman was an outfitter that had a lot of influence on that sort of thing. Let's see what else Military Man has to say about that. Les was a successful elk guide in Wyoming, as well as a wildcatter and a writer. And a wildcatter, for those of you who do not know, is someone who recreates cartridges, invents new ones, takes a 30-06, for instance, and necks it down to 25 caliber and makes a 25-06. And that actually happened way back in the 1920s. So this is what Les did. He maintained that the 270 Winchester and the 30-06 were more successful than larger Magnum cartridges on elk hunts because they produced moderate recoil from lighter weight rifles that people could get into the high country with. When he was asked to create the ultimate elk cartridge, he pointed the Remington folks towards his own 7mm 338 Winchester Wildcat rather than the 7mm Mashburn Super Magnum that Warren Page had brought them for exactly the same reason. Warren Page was their hunting editor, field editor at Field and Stream. Moderate recoil in a rifle, light enough to get to where the elk were, the trajectory of the 270 with a bullet mass of the 30-06. This was why that 7mm 338 Win Wildcat was so good. So larger 30 and 338 caliber magnums are more difficult for most of us to shoot well, but the 7 Rem Mag puts down ungulates without battering the user. You can put it in a sporter weight rifle without a break. There isn't a better combination of recoil, trajectory, and downrange thump available. Remington gave us the real winner in 1962, and that was the 7mm Remington Magnum, one of the best cartridges and rifles ever created. Now, that is pretty much what I believe, too. Thanks for that, MT Military Man. That kind of is the story of the 7 Mag. Now, it even goes farther back than that because there were several versions of it. The 7mm Sharp and Hart in the 1950s was pretty similar to what became the 7mm Remington Magnum. And even earlier than that, there were 7mm on that belted case, including one from H&H. All of that is covered in my book, The 7mm, Cartridges from Around the World. So if you really want to dive into the history of all the 7mm and find out how they came about, who was wildcatting what failed and why, and what succeeded and why, you might want to order this book. You can pick it up on Amazon, or you can order a signed, autographed copy from me at Ron Spomer Outdoors website, ronspomeroutdoors.com. All right, now let's find out what a lot of folks said they preferred for elk rifles. These are not the guys who were in our elk boot camp, but these are folks who just wrote in after watching some of my earlier videos on how to select the right elk cartridge and rifle. This is Dave 9170. He says 30-06 for 99.9999999% of situations. I think he's pretty confident. A hunter is going to encounter in the woods in the U.S. and Canada, the 30-06 with 180 grain AccuBond will drop just about any size elk there is at out to 500 yards. It's an extremely good round. Well, Dave, I can't argue against you too much on this one. I've had some pretty good luck with a 30-06 and 180 grain bullet myself. Now, here's a guy who's going for the 7 Rem Mag. This is Anthony. My 7mm Rem Mags have never failed me since 1978. That's a pretty good long time. From my first elk hunt until now, I have loved the 7mm Magnum. It's a one-shot, one-elk rifle cartridge setup. And from Shane, he says, I was once told as a kid that a 30-06 will handle all North American game. 35 years later, that has not been proven wrong. Now the 30-06 man. Ron says, hey, Ron, I know that I spent the first half of my hunting career trying to prove my grandfathers to be wrong about their 270 Winchester and their 30-06 Springfields. I used my big magnums. And the second half of my life, I proved them right by finally taking their advice. They were right all along, and I was wrong. And I know this Ron fella, he writes in quite often, and he loves the 270 Winchester. All right, what does Josh has to say? What's amazing to me is the sheer number of videos and articles that host these arguments over and over again. Even more amazing is the fanfare they bring in as people argue and contest, which is actually the best. As if there is only one. Truly, I am amazed. It's like dogs fence fighting while the gate is wide open. Yeah, Josh, but that's half the fun. One can just pick up his 7 Rem mag or his 30-06 or 270 or anything else and do wonderfully well with it because honestly, the elk and the deer really don't notice the difference as much as we do. But we're the ones who are arguing, and it's just part of human nature. We like to think that we've made the best selection. By golly, we're going to prove our point by arguing, even if it comes to blows. And it's just fun. It really is kind of fun to say, well, mine does this and yours does that, and this is the reason that I like mine better. But really, there's small differences between these, especially inside of 300 yards. But it's still fun to make your selection based on ballistic performance, whether it's a flatter trajectory or less wind deflection or more retained energy downrange or more affordable rifles and a wider distribution of ammunition. There are all kinds of reasons why we choose one over the other. But to insist that we have the absolute best and everybody else is an idiot, that's not quite fair. And it doesn't hold water either. Let's see what Jake has to say. Oh, different. 280 Ackley improved. That is the sweet spot. 7mm mag performance, almost, with recoil more like the 270 or the 30-06. Fast approaching 50 years with Lyme's disease, so my joints don't like the Magnum experience anymore, but the 280 fills the spot perfectly. Yeah, that's another reason to select your cartridge, which one you can more comfortably shoot. Charles says, of the rifles I own, I would choose 30-06, 300 Win mag, and 375 H&H mag. I would probably choose the 30-06 first, just because I have hunted with that rifle for 25 years and I know it. I know where it will hit. It is my go-to rifle. Getting a lot of votes for the 30-06 here. This is Chuck, I have and will continue to use the 7mm 08. Hey, now we've got something different. He's going to use it for everything from deer, pronghorn, and elk since the 1980s. 140 grain Barnes TTSX bullet at 2850 feet per second out to 400 yards, and as long as you hit the boiler room, game over. Since I refuse to shoot more than 400 yards at any living creature, I already have all the rifle I need. I can support you on that, Chuck. I've used that 7mm 08 for a lot of stuff too. And it's right in there with the 757 Mauser and the 284 Winchester, and really pretty close to the 280 Remington. Those are all great. Once again, it's that 7mm. I just think it's the perfect blend of bullet diameter and weight and subsequent recoil in a fairly light rifle. It just seems to work for everything. Here is George, a friend of mine. This is a double George. This is George writing about his friend George. A friend of mine, George, I won't give his last name, but he's an African guide and a developer of the 416 Remington Magnum. Well, then I think I can mention his name, George Hoffman. My friend George Hoffman used his 270 Winchester to shoot 71 elk with no problems. He used a 150 grain nozzle partition. According to a lot of gun scribes, even the Swedes will take lots of moose with the old 6.5 by 55, and that cartridge produces pretty much the same performance as a 6.5 Creedmoor. Yeah, it's true. Once again, it's the cartridge, not so much. It's the bullet. Yeah, it's where you park it. So it all ties together. Put the right bullet in the right place is what we always say. And the really experienced hunters seem to all agree to that. Regardless how big that bullet is, if you don't put it in the right place, So 416 Rem mag, maybe if you want to use it, it's going to do the job. But I think the little 6.5 by 55 Swede can do the same. How about Bubba? The best cartridge is the gun you have confidence in, the one that you hunt with. For me, it's my Winchester Model 70 in 7mm Remington Magnum. I purchased it in 1979, and I've hunted all over the U.S., in Canada, and Alaska. I won't hunt with any other gun. It's my confidence gun. It is topped with a Leupold VX1 in a 3-9. So there you go, a pretty reasonably sized scope. A lot of us would say it's way too small, but it works for this gentleman. Again, 7 Rem mag, one of my favorites. And he's been using that. So this is the one gun, the old beware the man with one gun because he probably knows how to use it. Absolutely true. It's not so much because that gun is the perfect caliber or cartridge so much as he knows it inside and out. He's shot it so many times, he knows how that bullet's going to drop, how it's going to deflect in the wind. It almost becomes automatic shooting something like that. And that's a big, big reason to stick with one. Some of us have new rifle fever and we're always trying new things, but I think the smarter move is to get one that works and stick with it. Now, this brings up an interesting thing we found out in this elk boot camp we had. We were watching all of the students shoot and training them how to get better field positions and compensate for drop at longer ranges and things, and shooting a lot of steel targets at 300 yards, but we would stretch them out now and then just so they could learn what's going on with these longer distances. So 460 yards all the way out to 600, 620 yards, real eye-openers for these folks. And we kept track of who was getting the most hits. And the winner of everything was a 17-year-old named Eli. And guess what he was shooting? It wasn't a 5 to 30 power scope, and it wasn't a 300 Magnum of some kind. He was shooting a Model 70 Winchester featherweight rifle chambered for the 270 Winchester. I forget which bullet he was shooting, but I think it was a Barnes triple shock, 140 grain, maybe 130. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the scope was a Leupold VX3, maybe they call it the 3i these days. The magnification range was 2.5 to 8, and the objective lens was just 36 millimeters. And he only missed one time out to 600 yards. Whoa. So it just goes to show you that you've got a fairly simple rifle and you know how to use it. You don't need all this high-tech stuff to get the job done. In fact, the guys with the really big, powerful scopes were doing more missing, I think, at the reasonable elk hunting ranges than this younger shooter with his 270. Because they were too busy fooling around with their scopes, dialing this and turning that and adjusting the parallax, when really all that's required is getting your cheek well, getting behind the rifle consistently, and making that shot. So something to consider, guys. Sometimes KISS, keep it simple, stupid, really works. All right, let's see. This is Bugler. I harvest elk almost every year with my bow. It's all about shot placement. So many people think they need a cannon to kill an elk, so they try to shoot a gun that they can't handle. Good point. And this means wounded animals. The 270 is a great elk rifle. I have taken over 25 elk with my bow, and none of them went more than 30 yards after being hit. Frank Glazer hunted in Alaska from 1915 until 1950, and Frank said his 220 Swift killed everything quicker than any rifle he had, except when he was hunting big bears. It's all about putting the bullet in the right place. Once again, guys, there we go. All right, let's see what else we have here. Here's something about elk. This is John commenting about backpack hunting for elk, and he says, don't forget you have to carry back all that meat, plus the antlers, all the time while grizzlies are following your scent trail. Yeah, we talked about this in camp too. A lot of folks are concerned about grizzlies. And in some places in the Rocky Mountain West, we do have grizzly issues and problems. Northeast Idaho is one of the big ones. All the areas surrounding Yellowstone Park, that's kind of a hotbed for grizzly bears. But also up Glacier Park, the Bob Marshall Wilderness, that whole front range of the Rocky Mountains through Montana has a lot of grizzlies, and they have been expanding their range. And there are reports of grizzlies out on the prairies as far as eastern Montana. I'm thinking Miles City area has had some reports of grizzlies clear over there. And as many will say, they've heard these stories about you're up in elk country around Yellowstone, you shoot, and that's the dinner bell. The grizzlies have learned that there's going to be a gut pile, if not an entire elk lying there, when they respond to that call. So they'll come to the shot. So most hunters are advised to go in at least pairs. You and your buddy need to hunt elk, and when someone shoots that elk, the two of you need to be there. One of you protects the hunter who is taking care of the meat. You don't just both work on the meat and get surprised by that grizzly, because it has happened several times. So good comment about that. When you're packing out an elk on a backpack hunt, you have got to be aware of grizzly bears. All right. Now I think we're going to get away from elk here. Folks are talking about some other things. Here's one from Tony. He said, "Hey, Ron, now let's hear you talk about how bullet weight," and he makes capital letters on his weight, "and twist rate affect one another. The weight has more effect than the length." Sorry, Tony, but it doesn't. I think this is a misnomer, a mistake that people have fed into over the years. That was the standard line when I was a kid. It was like, you're shooting a heavier bullet, you need more twist rate to stabilize it. So we all absorbed that as weight was the issue. It was length all along. It's the length of the bullet that determines whether or not you need faster twist barrel to stabilize it. I don't know how to explain it other than it just, I think it's like a top. You got more to balance when it's longer, but the top end wants to fall over. So I'm sorry, but it's not weight, really. The weight doesn't have anything to do with it. It's the length. Okay. This is JW in response to a video we did on the 6.8 Western versus the 280 Ackley Improved. JW says, "Guys, the economy is depressed. We're in a recession. The type of guys who buy new guns already have new guns and can't afford to buy something that only gives them 50 to maybe 100 feet per second more velocity. Only so many people watch the Kardashians. You can't make a spin-off expecting a larger audience." That one went over my head. "Those of us with the 270 WSM are happy. The Hornady boys have their line of inferior rounds. Nosler has their set of barrel burners. And the niche crowd are limited. And we're comparing a 25-06 AI versus a 280 Remington AI or even a 325 WSM. Most of these cartridges are going to die like the 264 Winchester Magnum did. It's a great cartridge, but it's unknown to Joe the plumber." Whew, well, JW aired a whole bunch of complaints. It was a little hard to keep track of them all, but the base, I think, is that he doesn't think we need these new cartridges and we don't need to even compare them. But of course, you're speaking for you, JW. The fact that the Nosler cartridges are quite popular with a lot of folks, and Hornady's line of inferior cartridges seem to be pretty darn popular, strikes me that a lot of people are interested in those. But hey, we all get to have our choices here, and JW seems to prefer whatever old cartridge he's using, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think, JW, that we are going to ignore the 6.8 Western or the 280 AI or even the 25-06 Ackley Improved or anything else. You know, it's all fodder here, and we are happy to discuss anything and everything as long as folks are interested in them. I'm sorry you're not. Okay. Here's somebody referencing a short I did on 800-yard group. Oh, that was what I shot down in Texas recently. Eamon says, "I am sure that you're a great hunter." No, I'm sure that you are a great hunter. A lot of people say your, Y-O-U-R, they spell it that way, when they mean you are, Y-O-U apostrophe A-R, a contraction of you are. So it's kind of confusing to read it sometimes when you see that. "I am sure you are a great hunter, but everyone saw your videos on how you shoot from the bench. So even if you say it was you who shot that group, no one would have believed you. Sorry." Yeah, well, I said in this little video clip that it was not my group. It was my friend Joe who shot it. But it was the real deal, and I shot that same rifle, and I got a group that was a half MOA at 100 yards. But his was less than half, so I figured I needed to show that one to show you what that rifle was capable of doing. But the point of that little short video was not so much who shot the group or what rifle and all the rest of it. It was to make my point. Those bullets all fell within 2 to 2.5 inches of the bullseye, the aiming point. At 800 yards, that was what I call super accurate hunting rifle performance. When I'm shooting at my aim point on the shoulder or just behind the shoulder of a deer or an elk or anything, I don't have to hit that exact spot to be successful. So if I've got a bullet that goes 2 inches off to the left or 2 inches to the right or higher or lower, and I'm in the middle of the chest to start with, that's a killing shot. That was my point, to imagine that there's a rifle you can shoot with a bullet that's that stabilized and accurate that you're going to hit within 2.5 inches of your aiming point. That is great field accuracy. This is someone called the Bright Way. Oh, and he's also commenting on that 800-yard shot. Let's see what he has to say. Sir Ron. Well, I like that. Some good respect here from Brightway. Sir Ron, it is impressive that you didn't mention the caliber and the rifle that shot that 3-inch group at 800 yards. Wow. Oh, well, thank you, Brightway. You think it's impressive because I didn't do any advertising, or you think are you being facetious here and wishing I had said it? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say it. Or do you want me to tell you what it was? Yeah, I heard from a lot of folks who want to know what that rifle was. Pretty much obvious that, hey, what kind of a rifle can shoot a 3-inch group at 800 yards? Here was the setup. It's called the Stealth Vision. It's not really a Stealth Vision built rifle. It's a rifle built for Stealth Vision. I'm forgetting what the action was on that. I'm thinking it was VT or TV. It's a small firm that builds custom actions, and then you get to barrel them. At any rate, that was the action from Pennsylvania. I'm sorry if I can't remember that name, but the barrel was pretty unique. I think it was called Avient or Avient. It's an experimental barrel they're working with now. They'll take a barrel sleeve. Now think of a carbon fiber barrel. The whole thing is in carbon fiber. There's a steel barrel in there, but it's shaved down to remove the weight. So you just essentially have the lining, the rifling is in there, and it's steel for handling the bullets. But then they put a sleeve or wrap of carbon to stiffen it up with lighter weight. That's the whole idea. Well, what this guy does is he puts a ceramic sleeve around that barrel, and then he puts carbon on the outside of that. I suppose because ceramic is fairly fragile, and it is then protected by the carbon. Seems kind of elaborate, but the point was it's shooting that accurately. Somehow it's contributing to the accuracy, and they were experimenting with it at Stealth Vision to see if it could absorb more shots without overheating. The idea with the ceramic is that it's going to dissipate the heat more effectively. And it seemed to be what was happening. So we shot some really great groups with that. The ammunition was loaded by Superior Ammo. It's kind of a boutique loader. And I'm pretty sure they were 180 grain Berger target bullets. And it was a 7 PRC. And the scope, this is where Stealth Vision comes in. This is a scope manufacturer. It's only 3 years old, but it's really impressive. I thought it was just, I got invited down there to meet the folks and see what it was all about, and I figured, great, another scope company. There's only about 1 million of them now, but they were really top of the line and different. It wasn't just another go to the Philippines or Japan and say, build me a scope and slap my name on it. They designed it in conjunction with the engineers over there, wherever they're having them made, and they specified the best of everything. The best glass, ED glass, and all that sort of stuff. And the guy who designed it is an optometrist, and he had studied lenses in college, and then he got into optometry, and he understands the human eye and the retina and the fovea in the back of your eye that sees most precisely. And he applied all of that knowledge to the scope and determined that the sharpest and best option for scope resolution, good visual quality from a scope, is with a 34 millimeter main tube. Wow, that's a little bigger than I want to mess around with in a hunting rifle because it just seems so big. But he got one that was around 3.5x to 18 power with a 44 millimeter objective, was wonderfully bright, and the edge-to-edge sharpness was just dead on. You know, on a lot of scopes, you get out to the edges and things get fuzzy and out of focus. Not this thing. It was just flat all the way. Just wonderful. And then they put a bubble level inside of the eyepiece of the scope, so you no longer have to look out of the scope at a bubble level if you're using one. Now, some of you might say, what the heck is a bubble level got to do with a scope and a rifle? Well, long-range shooters understand that if you do not have your rifle perfectly level, you got it canted to one side or the other. When you move that scope up, your rifle is pointing up so that bullet will drop in. you're using that line on the scope, the vertical reticle, expecting the bullet to follow it. But if you're canted, the bullet's not going to follow that cant line. It's going to be under the barrel and dropping down from where it came out. You're going to end up shooting to the right or the left of your target at distance beyond 400 or 500 yards. And the further out you are, the further over they go. And these target shooters, they've got to be precise. So they put a little bubble level on there. They get their scope perfectly level with the rifle, and then when they're in the field shooting, they have to look, because as you guys know, when we pick our rifles up, we generally have our heads canted off to the side. And most of us will then sort of instinctively cant the rifle a little bit. And then you start to lose your precision. So you look at a bubble level, and most of them are hung on the outside of a scope. Well, then you're looking at your target, you got to look at your bubble level, then back to your target, and maybe you shift it. Well, they put it in the viewfinder so you can always see it right there at the bottom, and you can pull your vertical crosshair right through that bubble and keep it perfectly level. And anticipating hunters getting excited and not doing it, they made a little battery-powered green light inside that comes on when it's perfectly level. When you're within 1 degree of being perfectly level, the green light will come on. So it makes it easy to keep things level out there at distance. Lots of innovations in this scope. At any rate, I was testing the scopes and the rifles that they had built for them. Stealth Vision has their name on these rifles. And the rifle might be built by Blue Mountain down in Texas, or Seekins up in Lewiston, Idaho, or Altera over in Boise. Some real high-end, deadly accurate rifles. And most of the ones we were shooting were giving us these half to quarter minute of angle groups out there at 300, 500, 800, 1,000 yards. We even got some at 1,200 yards. We were just dinging those steel plates one after another. So pretty impressive stuff. But that's what this 800-yard shot group came out of. While we were doing all that, we were testing this new barrel setup, and it was really pretty impressive. I am going to be paying attention to this ceramic idea. This is something new I had not heard of before. A ceramic sleeve around the barrel to dissipate the heat. Could be pretty useful thing, so keep your ears and eyes open on that coming down the pike. And if you want to find out more about it, you can check out Aviant, A-V-I-E-N-T, I think is how you spell it. We'll try to put it on the YouTube channel here. We'll put it down underneath it so you can look it up. But Stealth Vision be a good place to find it too. Just go to stealthvision.com. You'll find those guys pretty quickly. Pretty impressive. Nice bunch of guys too. And they really welcome calls and questions and stuff. They're not at all afraid to answer your questions about what they're doing and what makes it all work. So I'm going to look into that stuff a lot more. All right, let's see. Who else do we have here? Justin. Eye protection. He says, totally super important. My brother was blinded in one eye. Oh, I'm sorry about that, man. Blinded in one eye because he didn't put his eye protection when shooting his bolt action rifle. He had them on his hat, but he didn't put them down over his eyes after looking at the spotting scope, and then he shot and something happened and blew back some debris in his eye and he lost his vision. Wow, that's too bad, man. I was reminded of the importance of eye protection when I got this shell shock. This is one of our sponsors, and I really like their ear protection. You know, earmuffs. Everybody, I think, is aware of the dangers of getting blasted in the ears. And I've got a lot of these things, but the reason I like these so much is they've got this soft gel around the edges that doesn't pinch my head. And I get about 30 decibels of sound reduction when I clamp these babies on. Well, not over this hat. I'm not going to clamp them on. But they've got such a beautiful, soft little... I mean, I've got some of these earmuffs that pinch my head so bad I get a headache after 15 minutes. And these things just don't do it for me. So I'm really excited about those. But in the box came the eye protection. Duh. Why didn't I think of that? And why didn't anybody think of that? So it makes it pretty simple. You pick up the package deal and you're protecting your senses, you know, and it's kind of silly. I've been doing it all my life, blasting my ears out and risking my eyeballs by not having that kind of protection on. And the glasses that they provide are interchangeable. You can get the clear glass. I haven't even taken them out of the wrapper here yet. And now they're coming out with some colored glasses like the bronze ones, which are pretty cool in the summertime. And I'm hoping they come out with the yellow ones for contrast control. I don't know if you guys have ever tried yellow shooting glasses, but over the years I've used them several times, and on those cloudy days where a gray bird or a gray deer blends into the gray sagebrush or wooded background and you really can't pick them out, what's missing is contrast. And that yellow lens somehow improves the contrast and makes it easier to spot game on cloudy days. And how often don't we hunt on cloudy days? So I'm looking forward to getting some of those yellow ones to use on here. So yeah, make sure you protect your eyes and your ears, guys, because you only have 2 of each. You can probably get by without the shell, but the little hairs inside that transmit the sound to your brain, those you want to keep, and that's what that loud blast knocks off. Okay, let's see. We have someone from Washington, and I assume that is Washington State rather than D.C. I don't think they allow any shooters or hunters to live in Washington, D.C. Joseph. I don't understand. There are 2 names here, Joseph and Daniel. I'm going to assume it's Joseph. Hello, Mr. Spomer. That's me. I have been listening to your podcasts and watching your videos for some time now, and I have developed a real appreciation for your insights. I thought for a while there he was going to let me rip me a new one. This is good. So far, so good, Joseph. I wanted to ask your advice on a hunting rifle purchase. I would like one very versatile rifle that I can use for deer, elk, and bear. And I should also say that I would like to practice and make myself and my rifle effective out to 400 yards or so. The decision is between a 270 Winchester and a 300 Win Mag in a Browning X-Bolt. We already have components and the tools necessary to reload the 270 Winchester, so it is a compelling choice from an ammo cost perspective. However, the 300 Win Mag gives me a feeling of comfort for the potential 400-yard shots. So, which would you choose, and do you think the 270 Winchester has enough power for an elk at 400 yards? I appreciate your time. On Honest and Shoot Straight, Mr. Spomer. Oh, thank you, Joseph. Let's see if I can help you out here. Right off the bat, I'll say I would go with the 270 Winchester. For a lot of the reasons we've already covered in this episode, ability to shoot it without flinching, to shoot it well, to be able to practice more often with it because the ammo costs are less recoil. It just seems like guys who shoot magnums of any kind, especially the 30 and up magnums, don't want to get out on the range maybe as often as they should. Now, there's a solution to that, which involves another rifle. You might get one that's the same brand, the same action, get it in a 243 or a 223, something that's less expensive to shoot, less recoil, and practice with that to get familiar. The safety will be in the same place and the bolt and all the rest of it. But that means you have to buy another rifle and another scope and all the rest of it. So if you just want one, I think you're going to do fine with that 270, especially with today's bullets. They've made a huge difference in the effectiveness of our rifles. But the 270 Winchester, even back in the bad old days when it came out in 1925, just cup and core bullets, and yet early hunters, everyday mom and pops and grandpas and nephews and uncles were taking all kinds of game with it, including elk. But famously, there was Jack O'Connor, and he even took, I think he took a brown bear with it. Guys have been using it for elk and moose and everything else. So get yourself a good controlled expansion bullet, and that 270 will do more than effective work at 400 yards on an elk. I would shoot a 140 grain all copper bullet or a 150 grain Accubon, partition type, Federal terminal ascent, somewhere. But even if you go with a 130 grain bullet, if it's a controlled expansion bullet that retains most of its weight like the copper bullets do, they're going to penetrate deeply and just do the job. Don't think that you're going to hammer these elk into the ground with energy. Too many people make that mistake. I have taken elk with all kinds of big bores and small bores and everything in between, and there's not a lot of difference. It's creating hemorrhaging. Unless you hit the spinal column, the central nervous system somewhere, that elk's going to take a heavy hit and not get knocked down. Yeah, there are the exceptions that appear to be hydrostatic shock that just knocked him down, but we go over and over that, and it just has never been proven. So I would go with the 270, mild shooter, and just really get good with that by practicing and use the right bullet. You're going to do just fine. And you're going to have very few excuses to shoot at 400 yards anymore. You're going to get most of your elk inside of 200 yards. It's just the way it works. It always has for me. How about Danny? Oh, Danny's from Johannesburg. Hi, Ron. I love your podcast. I always listen to it on my way to work, and it makes the commute feel much shorter. 3 years ago, after my father passed away, I inherited his Berno ZKK 600 30-06 rifle. I took it to the range, and I found that it was hard to keep the groupings under 10 inches. Oh, my goodness. I then took the rifle to a gunsmith to see what was wrong. He took the gun apart, and he did everything from remounting the scope to rebedding the stock and a whole lot more. Unfortunately, he has now informed me that there seems to be some pitting in the barrel due to rusting, and that the barrel has probably reached the end of its lifetime. The rifle now groups better after he worked his magic, but the groupings are still around 4 inches. Yeah, improving your accuracy by doubles is not all that great when it starts off at 10 inches. Well, as I am not comfortable taking an unreliable gun out hunting, I would like your opinion. I'm now considering 3 different calibers to replace this 30-06. They are the .308 Winchester, the .300 Winchester Magnum, and the 7mm Remington Magnum. If you were to choose between these, which would you buy? I can only pick one. I mostly hunt a medium-sized game in South Africa, bushveld, where the shots are rarely more than 120 yards in thick brush. But I also want to be able to take it out into the open plains from time to time where 300-yard shots are more common. Okay, that's a good little analysis there, Donnie. And, oh, golly, you're not going to go wrong with any of those. Obviously, the 7 Rem mag and a 300 Win mag are going to be just about neck and neck for drop and deflection stuff. Going to have a little more recoil with the 300 Win mag, but I've never found it to be a problem. And it's certainly been proven in Africa. It's a great option. But the 7 Rem mag has worked beautifully for me as well, including on eland, which is, as you know, big. The 308 can take these animals, but you're going to start to run out of steam a little bit at the longer ranges. It's not going to have as flat of a trajectory. But boy, for that 120-yard in stuff, you've got a light, short, handy rifle with some great bullet selections in 308. And I think you're going to do just fine with that little thing with less recoil. You're going to have more fun shooting it. But if you're not bothered by recoil, I think the 7 Rem mag is a pretty darn good option. You know, if you're hunting in some thicker stuff and you want a really good tough bullet, you can get an all copper bullet or something like an A-frame Swift bullet in 175 grain weight and shoot that through your 7 Rem mag, and that'll do just fine on the bigger stuff. I always figure the 175 grain in a 7 Rem mag is the equivalent of the 190 grain in the 300 Win mag. You're going to get close to the same ballistic coefficients with the same basic bullet shape, but you'll have less recoil to deal with. And either one of them hits hard enough to do more than do the job because, once again, it's not the hard hit that does it. So that would be my recommendation. But again, you won't go wrong with any of them. All right, now we're going to go from South Africa to South Ohio, where Craig writes, "Okay, Ron, you have inspired me to spend money. Uh-oh. I'm planning an African trip in about 8 months for myself, my wife, my daughter, and granddaughter." Well, great. Good family vacation. We are doing a similar thing with our kids. Thinking of going over there with some of the grandkids as well as their parents, our kids. So here's getting back to Craig. He says, one of my questions is, would you have any reservations about taking a 9-year-old with you to Africa? She isn't going to hunt or anything, but I can't imagine going somewhere like that and not taking her with me. Probably be the only chance we will ever have. And are there any parts of Africa you've hunted that you really felt like you got to experience the culture and the country more than other places? This trip will be as much about Africa itself for them and the hunt for me. So thanks a lot, Ron. I watch every episode, and I love your take on most topics. Well, good, Craig. I think you'll like my take on this one because it's, by all means, take that 9-year-old. The grandkids we are thinking of taking over there are going to be about 8 and 10. No, Betsy's shaking her head. They're 9 and 11.
When they go.
When they go, they're going to be 9 and 11. Well, I wasn't that far off. But I think that's a great age to go over. And I think a good way to do it is to go with a family that grew up there. We hunt with Immenhof Safaris. I mention them quite often. It is a farm family. They're now in, I think, their fifth generation. And their kids, of course, grew up on the farm there, the same as our kids grow up on farms and ranches over here. They're interacting with wild game all the time as they grow up, including the snakes, and they all survive quite nicely. The snakes are no more problem there than they are over here. People make way too much of the snake thing. But, you got these ranch kids over there who are shooting springbuck and oryx with 223s when they're 7, 8 years old. It's just like you grow up to be a farm kid. You have to do farm things, and getting your meat is one of those. So I think what they do, if you can find a family like that to take yours to, those kids would interact with your granddaughter and give them a little different perspective than just having the adults around all the time. That could work out pretty well for you. We're going to do that with ours. They're going to be interacting with, what's Freddie now, 12 years old? So Freddie grew up doing all this stuff. We saw him when he was about 4 or less, and he was playing hunter and going along with his dad and the clients on the big game hunts and stuff, and just eats it up, as you can imagine, and is extremely competent. I think he was 14 this year. We were over there, and I watched him shoot a bolt action 458 lot and not even flinch. So that's the kind of experience you want your kids to grow up with and not be afraid of things and stuff. So I think that would be a great way to go. If you want, just look up Immenhof Safaris on the internet, do a search, and it'll pop up. Like I say, it's a family operation. You'll be staying there in the ranch with them, in the wing that's set aside for guests. You'll eat with the family, and you'll go out for drives with them. You can go for game drives. You can go to nearby game parks where you can find leopards and cheetah and elephants and all sorts of things, and they can go along on game drives on the ranch with you, or just go for a game drive to take photos of it and that sort of thing. Great little option. I have always found that non-hunters, whether they're wives or husbands, because I've been over there where some women were hunting and husbands weren't, and they always have a great time just because of the ambiance and the whole experience. So by all means, take your family and be prepared for having a great time. Oh, and if you're contacting Immenhof, ask them about their wildlife tours, because we've gone with them to several places in the country, including one of the great national parks over there, Etosha. And a drive through Etosha is just, you see everything. And I can highly recommend it. You're going to have a great time. All right. How about Arkansas with Kevin? Hey, I love all the info on all the cartridges that you share. I have a cartridge twist rate bullet question on the 7-rem mag. It's my personal favorite, by the way. Anyway, I'm having trouble getting good groups from my X-Bolt with a 1 and 9.5 twist. That means it twists one time in 9.5 inches of travel down the barrel. And he's using ELDX bullets. Didn't say what the weight of that bullet was. It's a very accurate rifle with other bullets with a lower BC, but I'm wondering if I need to go ahead and get a 1 and 8 twist for this bullet. The high BC bullets are here to stay, and they're becoming easier to find. Manufacturers seem to be weaning themselves from the lower BC bullets. A penny for your thoughts. Kevin. Now, Kevin, I would ask you why you want these extremely long bullets. Do you need to have the advantages of them, which is after 400 yards, you start to get an advantage in less wind deflection? So you're talking about a really long, heavy bullet. In 7-rem mags, you're looking at 175 to 190, 180 and 185. They're big, heavy bullets. Do you really need that bullet? Now, if you're shooting steel targets out to 1,000 yards like we were doing with that 7 PRC down there with stealth vision, yeah, you do get an advantage there, especially if the wind is up a little bit. But if that's not really an issue, I don't know that you need to worry about this twist rate thing. Apparently, you're using that really heavy, long ELDX bullet. And if that's what you absolutely want to do, yeah, you might need to go to a 1 and 8 twist. 9.5 getting a little bit slow. So you might want to try that. But otherwise, I would just go with a little bit less lengthen your bullet, shoot it a little bit faster, yeah, you're going to get an inch or 3 of more wind deflection at extreme range. But again, if you don't need to shoot 800 to 1,000 yards, it really isn't that much of an issue. So I don't know, just give that a try. But if you absolutely want it to be shooting that ELDX bullet you're now shooting, you probably do need to go to a faster twist. Bruce from Colorado. Ron, I really appreciate the time you take to educate the average hunter about all things firearms related. While watching one of your more recent videos about your new single-shot rifle, wow, many good comments, and your reference to another channel that asked people to prove that they can shoot minute angle is spot on. Too many people are somewhat fooling themselves with small groups under ideal conditions. In reality, it takes around 30 shots to give you statistically valid information on accuracy. There's a well-known bullet company with several videos that explain this. Our hunting rifles need to shoot 1 to 3 shots consistently, but those 3 shots will be part of a larger dispersion pattern. If you take the time to shoot those 30-shot groups, you'll find that most people in their rifle will shoot 1 MOA at best, and that's plenty good for hunting, as you have often stated. I hand load for my rifles, and I want quarter MOA. Realistically, that's probably not happening. So I am happy if I get 1 MOA with 30 shots. Thanks for all you do, and that rifle is beautiful. Yes. So the rifle Bruce is talking about is my Park West Arms SD10 single-shot falling block. It's absolutely gorgeous rifle, and it is shooting MOA or slightly better now that I've built some good loads for it. When I first started working with it, I just went out and shot it and brought you guys along, and I was not getting all that good of performance out of it, and people were just upset. Oh my gosh, what a piece of junk. You need to send it back. They should be ashamed of themselves for building it. I was dismayed. It's like, what? You guys are not getting this process. This rifle is an outstanding piece of craftsmanship, and it's just what I wanted. It's a little more than I wanted. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it shoots beautifully. This is a single shot. This is not some super long-range precision target rifle. This is a stalking rifle. Probably not going to shoot it farther than 300 yards, although right now it's shooting accurately enough to go to 400. But I'm still working with it, finding out exactly what it'll do, just like Bruce here said. A 30-shot group would be a much better indication of what your performance is, and I want to shoot that group 1 day at a time, shall we say. In other words, once I've got my final load all tweaked and ready to go, I want to shoot it while I'm sitting offhand. I want to shoot it while I'm standing at 100 yards and see if I can hit my target. I want to shoot it in all the field positions, off of my pack, off of shooting sticks and all these different things to see how consistently I can hit a deer-sized target. But then I also want to see how precisely it groups at 300 yards shooting off the bench. Just all the things that it'll do. But if I do 1 shot every day under different environmental conditions, hotter, colder, windy, or less windy, that's going to tell me what that rifle is going to group consistently. And I don't know that I have to do it 30 times, but gosh, 10 to 15 or maybe 20 would really tell the tale. You would then know that that rifle is pretty consistently going to hit that same spot. And thus far, every time I've gone out cold with that rifle and taken my first shot, it's landing in almost the exact same spot. And I would say I've got probably a 3/4 inch group, but I haven't been keeping accurate records. This is while I'm doing load development and different tests. So what I'm going to start doing from now on is using the same target every time and just give it that 1 shot. Take it down and save it for the next one and just see what it'll do over a course of maybe 20 shots with the same load every time. That's going to be fun. All right, let's see. We've got some time yet. Getting close to the end. Betsy wants me to wrap it up. I don't know why, but I guess we're going to have to wait for Joseph and Wes, who have some questions here, until the next time. So, hey, that was it. Lots of elk rifles and cartridge information here. We didn't talk a lot about bullets, which kind of surprises me because I'm always emphasizing that, guys. It's the bullet. That's way more important than the cartridge. So do think about which bullet is going to be best for elk. And then the combination of a good shooter, putting his bullet where it belongs, and it's the right bullet, that's going to make almost any centerfire cartridge an effective elk cartridge. RSOTV, we are inviting all of you to join RSOTV because we have all of our videos on there. And given what happens with these video channels getting closed down sometimes for various infractions that sometimes you're not even aware of, it's a little bit frightening. So we want to have our videos somewhere where they will not be taken down. And if we suddenly lose our channel, where do you go to find more? RSOTV is the answer. Now, this is going to cost you some money. I can understand why a lot of folks are going to say, I'm not going to spend $5 a month watching these things when I can get them for free on YouTube. Yeah, it's fine. Go for it. But if you could help us out by joining RSOTV and watch these videos there, we can continue in case the stuff hits the fan here. Also, we have videos on there that do not appear on YouTube. Those are the ones where we can get into the nitty-gritty of guns and different parts of guns and how they work and all that are not allowed to be shown on the YouTube channels. So you're going to get some extra videos there. We're going to start doing more of those now that we've got a pretty good following there. It's worth our time to do that for you guys. And we can ramp that up if more people join us. So you might want to check it out. Go to ronspomeroutdoors.com, our website, and look for RSOTV. Click on it and join us there. We would love it. And let us know how we're doing. We dropped a video on the Q Fix, which is an unusual little rifle we just discovered recently. Betsy shot one in Africa, borrowed it from the PH, and was in love. She said, oh my goodness, this rifle is the steadiest I've ever used, which surprised the heck out of me. But she made a perfect shot on an Impala, and she was in love. So she's all excited about this Q-Fix rifle. We went over to the Q factory to see how they were made, talked to the engineers. Great guys over there. We were really impressed. I'm still not sold on the design of the rifle, but it sure does work well. And Betsy's all excited to have a Q-Fix rifle in 6.5 Creedmoor, I guess they're going to send her. Crazy. She's just ruining my reputation here by association. At any rate, we've dropped a video on that Q-Fix, and it shows how they're put together, all the little parts and what makes it unique. And it is unique. It is not a modified rifle of any kind you've ever seen. It kind of looks like an AR style, but it's a bolt action. And this the whole system is different, unique. They started from scratch on this one, and the engineers really came up with some clever ideas. So that's the latest one on RSOTV. Anything else, my dear, my boss, my commander?
Boss is better.
Queen.
Yeah. The knife.
Knives. Betsy said, remember, you're going on a moose hunt. Well, maybe a moose hunt, maybe a bear hunt. I'm going up to Alaska to hunt, and obviously I've got to take my knives because there's a bunch of meat involved in this one. So we're going to be working with one of my favorites, the Summit, which is a diamond blade knife. I might take a Knives of Alaska knife just because it's Alaska. Knives of Alaska in Alaska seems appropriate, but I've been using this Summit for a couple of years now on my deer and elk, and it just has the right balance. It has the right blade length. It stays sharp. I could probably do a moose and a bear and a couple other things without worrying about losing the edge on that thing. And it also has a companion knife, which is a little caping knife, which is really sweet to use, taking off around the antlers and horns and different things like that, and off the face and caping out an animal. So I might take those two up there, but I'm also going to be doing some fishing, so I'm going to have a fish fillet knife, and I think I have one in a box here somewhere from Knives of Alaska. That might be my Knives of Alaska trip to Alaska. Hey, guys. That always sets the dogs off. It never ceases to amaze me. Those dogs just go bananas every time I ring that bell. Guys, that is the signal for setting off the dogs, but also comment of the week. And a comment of the week, I'm going to give it to MT Military Man, who talked about the history of the development of the 7mm Remington Magnum with Les Bowman, that Wyoming outfitter. Les was really quite famous back in the 60s, 70s, and I think he was still guiding a little later than that, but obviously he was a great elk guide and mule deer guide in western Wyoming. But he was a wildcatter, and he was fooling around with some of these famous writers and wildcatters back in the day that came up with that 7 Rem Magnum. And I always like history, so when folks like MT Military Man write in with some of this good history, I think it educates all of us and kind of fills in the spaces. It's nice to know a cartridge and what it does, but it's extra special when you know how it came about. So hats off to you, MT Military Man, and thanks for writing in with that good history on Les Bowman and the development of the 7mm Remington Magnum, my favorite all-around cartridge. So thanks to everyone for joining us. We will see you next time. Keep those comments and complaints coming in. We love it.
Hunt on, shoot straight.
Betsy says, hunt honest and shoot straight with your Q Fix 6.5 Creed Mower.